British Prime Minister Theresa May has won a confidence vote by members of her own party.
This has been a long and challenging day, but at the end of it, I'm pleased to have received the backing of my colleagues in tonight's ballot.
The vote was triggered when 48 Conservative MPs declared they had no confidence in her leadership. 117, or one-third of all sitting Tories, voted against her. 200 voted for her. May has been criticized for the tentative agreement she struck to leave the European Union. A parliamentary vote on that deal was postponed when she realized it would be defeated. Brexit is set to take effect in March. May flies to Brussels tomorrow to continue negotiations with EU leaders. So, is it smooth sailing now for May and her Brexit deal? I doubt it. Or does she still face significant challenges? Andy Percy is a British Conservative MP and the UK trade envoy to Canada. Mr. Percy, you voted for Ms. May. How did you come to that conclusion?
Well, I just think that she is the best way in which we deliver Brexit. All of the other alternatives compared to the Prime Minister's plan are way worse. They're much worse than what the Prime Minister has negotiated. She's spent 18 months negotiating this deal. So I just think she's the best person to lead us through this process.
Is she beleaguered, though, not having support from a third of her caucus at this point?
Well, the strange thing about this, of course, is she got 63% of the vote, which is actually a greater proportion of the vote than when she became our leader and became Prime Minister 2 years ago. So, look, having a third, and as the Prime Minister in her statement outside number 10 this evening acknowledged, is a third of colleagues not having confidence in her is obviously it's not great. But at the end of the day, she got way more votes than she received when she became our leader and Prime Minister. And this now ends it for a year, because there can't be another challenge to her under our party rules and caucus rules for a year. We need to just we need to get behind her and get this deal delivered, which is what the people voted for.
But it's certainly not the end of her challenges. She still has to come up with a deal that Parliament is going to find palatable. She's headed off to Brussels to do that. Do you think that she can expect much sympathy from the folks in Brussels? Can she really hope for something that will concretely change this deal when she goes there?
Well, part of the problem she's had is that, we have a Parliament which is, frankly, stuffed full of people who lost the referendum. So most members of Parliament campaigned for Remain. They lost. They've tried to tie her hands throughout this process. Everybody has their own vision of what Brexit should look like. Obviously, we're a minority government. We rely on the support of the DUP from Northern Ireland. It's very challenging. But I think at the end of the day, the European Union understands that the alternative to the Prime Minister's deal is potentially the UK leaving the European Union without a deal. That's not in our interest. It's not in the EU's interest. So I think, she had some good discussions in Berlin earlier in the week, and she was due to be in the Republic of Ireland today until some of my colleagues, what I think was a rather silly move, moved this vote against her. So I think the EU is trying to be helpful, but this is a really complex divorce. It's, if you think someone who's been married for 40 years, leaving that relationship is very difficult. But I think some EU leaders are trying to be helpful on this. We have to just hope that she can secure something.
Well, and so what is your best case scenario? How can you see this resolving itself in a way that is positive?
Look, I was a Brexiteer. I campaigned for Brexit. My constituents voted for it and the public voted for it. But I think most people in the UK, whether they will leave or remain, want us just to get on with this issue. But I think they also want us to leave with a deal, because that's in our economic interest. It's in the EU's economic interest. So the best thing we can do is the deal the Prime Minister has negotiated, get that through Parliament. There are some issues around this whole issue of the Northern Ireland backstop. And if she can get some changes to that, I think, leaving the EU with a deal is better for everybody. I think it's actually the only way in actual fact we will leave. So I hope she gets some changes in these next few days and weeks. And parliamentarians have to ask themselves, are they Democrats or not? The people voted. We had a referendum. We voted 6-1 in Parliament to give the people the final say on this. And the question now for we parliamentarians is, are we Democrats, and do we give the people what they voted for? And I think we have to. And the best way out is with a negotiated deal.
But how likely is that at this point? It's obviously your preferred scenario, but is it realistic?
Well, I mean, it relies on politicians and members of Parliament being, prepared to compromise. And, in politics as it is today, that is not always an achievable aim, having people be reasonable and compromise. But at the end of the day, what are the alternatives to this? Because if we betray the vote of the public, there will be consequences to that. I think the electorate will be very angry. So I think MPs have to do some soul searching, particularly on my side, but similarly some MPs on the other side as well, and particularly in the Labour Party. A lot of MPs represent constituencies that voted very heavily to leave the EU. And we have to do some soul searching and say, look, do we respect democracy? Do we make good on this result? And do we come together with a sensible deal? In any negotiation, not everybody gets what they want. And not a lot in the deal I don't particularly agree with or like, but I accept this was a relatively marginal result. And we have to be mature about this. And I think it is possible for the Prime Minister to craft a majority in favour of this deal, but that will rely on some tweaks and some changes to what has been negotiated.
Do you think that the most vocal proponents of leaving, the Boris Johnsons, can be expected to support this deal?
Well, I mean, look, there's a lot of people who have, different agendas here around their own leadership ambitions and all the rest of it. All I can say is that, this vote this evening ends the issue of the leadership for another 12 months. The Prime Minister also said she won't lead us into the next election. So, we leave the European Union at 11 p.m. UK time on the 29th of March. There isn't going to be another leadership contest. That can't happen under our rules. So I think people like Boris Johnson and other leavers, I was a leaver myself, have to, accept the result of this leadership election tonight. And they have to be mature and sensible about this and, frankly, grow up a little bit. And, accept that if we're going to leave the European Union as the people want us to, then compromises have to be made. So I'm hopeful that some of them will come on board. But similarly, there's a challenge here for opposition MPs, as I said.
It is a fascinating and complex situation. Thank you very much for giving us your perspective on it, Andrew Percy.
It's a pleasure anytime.